Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're tuning in, you are probably looking for the fastest, most comprehensive shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
And that is exactly what we try to do. We take your sources, the dense research, the policy papers, all of it, and we turn it into focused, actionable knowledge.
And today's topic is, well, it's less about a new gadget or a new piece of hardware and more about a really fundamental philosophical change in how modern conflict is waged.
It really is. We're diving into a strategic pivot that shifts communications from being, powerful but static vulnerability into something dynamic, something adaptive, a shield, really.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We've been looking at sources detailing just a radical reimagining of how modern forces communicate and, maybe more importantly, how they survive in a highly contested environment.
Right.
For decades, the goal in military communications was always, power. More power. Increase the range, increase the bandwidth, make the signal stronger.
Just blast it out there.
Exactly. And what we're learning now is that that's the old playbook. And it's a playbook that, today, leads straight to disaster.
That's the whole crux of the discovery in these sources. The core objective driving this entire strategy is no longer brute force. The phrase they use is decision dominance through survivability and adaptability.
Decision dominance.
Yeah, it marks a complete shift in focus from hardware superiority to software intelligence. The goal is to make the communications link basically disappear, to become invisible.
And that's our deep dive today. We're getting into this blueprint for what the sources are calling spectrum-enabled warfare. And this is where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. We're talking about a world where common, everyday civilian technologies, things you have in your pocket, like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, advanced AI, they're no longer considered, just distractions.
No, they're becoming the critical infrastructure.
The critical, low-signature infrastructure of the new battleground. We really need to see how they plan to turn the electromagnetic spectrum itself into active maneuver space.
And that framing is absolutely essential. The environment we're discussing is the electromagnetic spectrum, the EMS.
Right.
In these large-scale, near-peer conflicts, what the sources call LSCO, large-scale combat operations, the EMS is no longer a guaranteed medium for friendly traffic. It's not your private highway anymore.
It's a battlefield.
It is a recognized, highly contested maneuver space. Adversaries are actively mapping it, they're jamming specific frequencies, and they are constantly exploiting every static transmission they can find to get a tactical edge.
So, okay, if the enemy is that good at mapping the spectrum, what does that mean for the strategic challenge facing commanders on the ground? What does that feel like?
It means that predictability has become an existential risk. It's a death sentence. Static, hardware-defined systems are no longer assets, they're liabilities.
Because they're predictable.
Precisely. If you know exactly where a high-power antenna has to be, and you know the frequency it broadcasts on, you've mapped the target. The only path forward for survival is this transition to a dynamic, resilient, almost invisible, living, software-defined network of networks.
So the reliability that once came from that stability, from that predictability.
That's now a guaranteed target for a kinetic or an electronic attack. It's a bullseye.
All right, let's jump right into that. Let's talk about the core vulnerability they were so aggressively trying to avoid.
Okay.
When people, traditionally think about communication security, they focus on encryption, making the data hard to read. But this strategy is focused on a much more basic problem.
It's more fundamental, yeah.
It's about making the transmission itself hard to find. They call this signature management, and the sources identify it as the, quote, center of gravity for the modern tactical network.
And that's such a key phrase. A center of gravity is the thing that if you can attack it, the whole structure collapses. So protecting it is everything.
What?
Think of it like a difference in security strategy. You can build a safe deposit box, a highly encrypted vault, but if that vault is sitting in the middle of an open field, painted bright red,
It's still going to get hit.
it's still going to get hit. So the focus here shifts entirely from just protecting the content to protecting the signal itself to minimizing its broadcast profile so the enemy never even knows it's there in the first place.
And that requires really deep changes to how tactical forces operate.
Oh, fundamentally.
And the reason this shift is so critical, it comes down to a really basic tactical imperative. Communications must enable tactics. They cannot constrain them.
They can't dictate the terms of the fight.
Exactly. The current doctrine for surviving a modern, precision strike environment, it demands that ground forces be highly dispersed, spread out. If your network requires those dispersed forces to cluster up, to huddle together, just to communicate, the network itself is defeating the doctrine. It's working against you.
Precisely. And the sources point to incredibly specific, actionable intelligence driving this change. They cite what they call the rule of 10.
The rule of 10. Okay, what is that?
It's based on intelligence analysis that suggests that any assembled group of 10 or more personnel or vehicles or antenna is automatically designated as a priority target.
Automatically.
Automatically. For sophisticated, rapid precision strikes, particularly from peer adversaries like Russian forces, who have demonstrated highly effective signals intelligence and, drone-coordinated fire.
That is a stark and, frankly, a pretty disturbing metric. Just 10 people together means the adversary treats that spot as a command node or a staging area.
Or just a high-value asset worth an immediate expensive strike, yeah.
So the implication for the network architecture is, it's just profound. The system has to function seamlessly, reliably, and quietly, even when, and this is another quote, every soldier is isolated.
And that's the design challenge. If your network requires a big, high-power antenna or a cluster of vehicles to generate a stable, high-bandwidth link, it forces people to cluster.
Which, according to the rule of 10, is a death sentence.
It literally invites kinetic destruction.
Yeah.
This is why that centralized static communications planning is obsolete. It's just painting a target on your own back.
So the old way was building one powerful, reliable, centralized communication system, what we might call a monolithic network. The new strategy is just aggressively rejecting that whole idea.
A total rejection. It's a conceptual break from the traditional military-industrial complex model of network design.
How so?
The fundamental strategic error they're correcting here is the idea of the single network. Building one unified proprietary system, no matter how robustly encrypted it is, creates a unified attack surface.
The single point of failure, in a way.
In a huge way. That system can be mapped, it can be easily targeted, and it can be jammed across its entire operational footprint by a sophisticated adversary who's had years to study it.
Which is why the solution they propose is so fascinating. They call it the network of networks. It sounds simple, but it's described as a federated ecosystem of totally disparate, independent networks.
Right. And they're only bridged together when absolutely necessary to move data from point A to point B.
Think of it as a vast, tangled jungle of communication pathways.
That's a great analogy. These independent pathways include everything: repurposed civilian 5G infrastructure, dedicated military mesh networks, existing high-security protocols like tactical Link 16.
And even, consumer-grade stuff?
Yeah, and even the opportunistic integration of consumer-grade IoT sensors and commercial Wi-Fi. It's about leveraging whatever spectrum resources are available in that immediate environment at that immediate moment.
That diversity is the defense itself.
It is, because it makes it functionally impossible for an enemy to build a single electronic warfare countermeasure that can defeat the entire ecosystem at the same time.
You can't build one key for 1,000 different locks.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, the documents raise a significant warning here. There's a trap that planners have to avoid.
Okay.
The vulnerability of simplification. Specifically, the danger of what they call a flat network.
What do you mean by a flat network? If they're all disparate systems, how can it be flat?
A flat network means that, logically, every device on it can see every other device. From the most high-security tactical radio all the way down to the most rudimentary environmental sensor, the example they use is a compromised toaster.
A toaster.
A toaster. If they're on the same internal IP structure, they have ecological access once an adversary gets inside.
So walk me through that attack path. How does that pivot from a toaster to a radio actually work?
Okay, so the attacker compromises the sensor, the toaster, which might only have, say, a basic password protection or maybe a zero-day vulnerability in its commercial software.
Something easy to get into.
Right. Because the network is flat, the attacker now has a foothold inside what's supposed to be the secure perimeter. From there, they can use standard unencrypted network mapping tools, like just scanning the routing tables, which will quickly reveal the presence and location of high-value targets.
Like the command's primary tactical radio or a server cluster.
Exactly. By compromising the toaster, they haven't just taken out a sensor. They've leveraged that tiny vulnerability to find the biggest strategic risk in the entire network.
So that immediate strategic risk is why the boundaries between these federated networks have to be rigorously maintained. Data can flow between them, but you can't let the vulnerability of one section leak into the operational security of another.
It's the whole principle. You have to have firewalls, not just digital ones, but architectural ones between the different networks.
Okay, so if part one was about the need for physical dispersion and network boundaries, part two seems to be about redefining our expectations of connectivity itself.
It is. This entire resilient architecture, it requires the military to abandon its traditional rigid expectation of perfect comms.
Right. We're all culturally conditioned to expect zero latency, zero delay in digital communication.
Instantly.
Yeah, if the comms aren't 100% crystal clear and instantaneous, we assume they failed. This new resilient IP-based architecture, which they've branded the Internet of Battle things, it demands something different.
It demands tolerance, it demands patience, and it demands adaptability.
And it demands variable latency management. This feels like a revolutionary shift in operational planning.
It is. Instead of treating all data as having equal priority and requiring immediate delivery, the network is designed to accept delays based entirely on the priority and nature of that data. And that tolerance is the operational core of its survivability.
Okay, let's deep dive on that. Variable latency. How do they functionally differentiate these data tiers? What does that look like?
The network maintains tiers. So for the highest priority stuff, the standard for active tactical data, meaning critical, time-sensitive information like movement orders, firing solutions, immediate threat warnings, that's still relatively quick.
Real quick.
A 2 to 3 second standard. That's essentially real time for human decision-making speed, which is achievable with high-priority queuing in the software.
Okay, that makes sense for the critical stuff. But then you have this massive strategic advantage that's embedded in the other tier, the slow data tier.
Exactly, and this is for everything else. Logistics reports, routine status updates, heavy intelligence packets that aren't immediately actionable, administrative messages.
The stuff that doesn't need to be there in 1 second.
Right. This is data that can tolerate significant delays, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe even up to a full minute. And this tolerance for delay, it's not a bug. It's not an unavoidable sacrifice. It is explicitly a design feature.
That's the strategic benefit right there.
Yeah.
You are actively turning time into a defense mechanism.
Precisely. If the network can afford to wait a full minute to transmit a large logistics report, it can strategically choose to burst that data only during a window when the spectrum environment is safest.
What would a safe window look like?
It could be anything. A moment of high atmospheric clutter that helps hide the signal, or a moment when the adversary's jamming cycle has paused, or maybe when they're actively targeting a completely different frequency band.
So you wait for them to look away, and then you send.
You wait for the noise. This minimizes the signal's broadcast time and drastically reduces its signature, making it a ghost in the spectrum. Instead of a steady, traceable high-power stream, you get these tiny, infrequent, low-power packets that, statistically, just look like background noise.
So the whole operational focus shifts from constant transmission to effective, survivable delivery.
Right.
Regardless of how slow the pipeline is.
Right. And this entire concept relies heavily on what they call routing agnosticism.
Okay, another one of those terms, routing agnosticism. Break that down.
It's the abstraction layer that ties it all together. This is where the complexity of the underlying chaotic system is completely hidden from the user and the tactical planner. The principle is simple. The user should not and cannot care which router or which medium handles the traffic.
It's the ultimate removal of technical preference from the operational decision.
Yes, and they explicitly state there can be no golden path.
No golden path.
In traditional military comms, commanders often develop a preference for the system they feel is most reliable. You know, I always trust the satellite link.
Right, that's the one that works.
Exactly. But that makes that link a single, identifiable, high-value target for the enemy. With agnosticism, that changes entirely. Whether the data travels via high-frequency skywave bouncing a low-power signal off the ionosphere, or via a low-Earth orbit satellite, or through a daisy chain of ground sensors, it's irrelevant to the end user.
That sounds great in theory, but as the commander, wouldn't you worry about the reliability of a low-power link bouncing off the atmosphere versus a dedicated high-power satellite?
And that's the exact challenge the software layer solves. The network's intelligence is constantly calculating the secure path, the capacity, and the projected latency of every available medium all the time.
So it's making those decisions for you.
Instantly. If the HF Skywave is currently the only available low-signature route that meets the 3-second delivery standard for a tactical alert, the system just uses it. The only metric that matters is secure and timely delivery appropriate to the data's priority tier.
And all the engineering headaches, error correction, rerouting, security management, that's all handled automatically.
Below the commander's decision layer.
Yep. Which brings us back to the listener's everyday life.
Hmm.
I mean, when you use your phone to send a critical message, you don't track every cellular tower and cable and server hop it passes through.
No, you just expect it to get there.
You just expect the system to use the best available path to get it there securely. And this architecture is applying that identical operational mindset, using every available path, no matter how weird or low power goes, to the tactical environment.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a federated, decentralized network that embraces strategic delay to survive. Now we need to look at the specific low-signature tech that makes this real.
Implementation, yeah.
The whole strategy seems to be centered on blending in, using pervasive civilian protocols to hide tactical traffic in plain sight.
And this is the genius of what they call cross-domain blending. The system is moving beyond just traditional software-defined radios, or SDRs, which just let you jump between different military frequency bands.
This is more than that.
Much more. It's actively integrating protocols that are ubiquitous globally, and therefore, they're easily masked by the sheer volume of civilian noise that's already out there.
And the sources identify some specific protocols that are integrated as peer transport layers. And we're talking about basic consumer tech here.
The stuff in your house. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and the lesser-known but strategically critical ultra-wideband, or UWB.
These aren't just backups, are they?
No, not at all. They are fundamental to the network's survivability because they achieve signature reduction by default. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are already saturating the spectrum globally. Every cafe, every building, every car is generating these signals.
So you're hiding in that noise.
Exactly. Military-grade data, when it's properly encrypted and masked, can just look like general background noise. It's a signal within the noise, rather than a clear, high-power beacon shouting, "Here I am!"
And UWB is particularly fascinating because it speaks directly to the physics of signature management. It transmits data across an extremely wide frequency range at incredibly low power.
That's the key technical insight we need to unpack here. Unlike narrowband transmissions, which focus all their energy into a tight little frequency lane, UWB spreads its power so thinly across a massive slice of the spectrum.
So it's very faint at any one point.
It's so faint that at any single point on the spectrum, the signal level is often below the ambient radio noise floor, the background static.
Wow.
This makes it almost impossible for electronic warfare systems to detect using traditional methods, and certainly difficult to jam effectively without spending an enormous amount of power across that entire wideband slice all at once.
And to show just how radical this cross-domain integration is, the sources give this really vivid scenario.
They do. Imagine a situation deep within contested territory. Any high-power link would be instantly targeted and destroyed. A reconnaissance UAV needs to send critical targeting information back to a command post, say 30 kilometers away.
But it can't just broadcast.
Can't broadcast, so instead the UAV creates a relay. It bursts processed metadata to a cluster of nearby ground sensors, and in this case they use the provocative example of a smart minefield.
A smart minefield.
Yeah.
Acting as a router. Wait, the mines are the routers?
The mines are the routers. It demonstrates this operational tolerance for the absurd. The individual mines, which are already in place and acting as these low-power, inexpensive IoT relays,
Right, they're already there.
they daisy-chain the signal through the physical terrain using repeated UWB hops from one mine to the next. It's slow. The message might take 30 seconds to travel that whole distance, but that delay guarantees survivability.
Because no single step in that chain is visible for long, and no single cheap component is worth a multi-million-dollar precision strike.
You've completely flipped the cost-benefit analysis for the enemy. They have to spend massive signals intelligence resources trying to track these tiny, intermittent UWB bursts that are deliberately slow and weak. It's not worth their time.
And that efficiency, that ties into the necessity of what they call advanced obfuscation. Because even with low-power intermittent signals, a sophisticated adversary can still do what's called pattern-of-life analysis.
Right. If they detect a low-power source transmitting a specific protocol at the same time every hour, or from the same place,
They could eventually build a pattern, locate the transmitter, and target it.
so the defense here has to be to introduce deliberate, dynamic chaos into the transmission profile. Simple randomness isn't enough. It has to be intelligent chaos.
And this is where the AI comes in, the string concept.
Absolutely. This is heavily reliant on AI. Future systems must use a dynamic string of virtual private networks, VPNs, that are managed entirely by artificial intelligence, not just one layer of encryption, but a shifting, multi-layered string of routing tunnels and encryption algorithms.
And what's the AI's complex function here? It's not just maintaining the connection.
No, the AI is the master obfuscator. It's designed to automatically flex to new settings and protocols constantly, faster than a human operator could track, let alone an adversary could analyze.
So it's constantly changing the rules of the game.
Its primary purpose is to deliberately introduce jitter and randomness into the transmission profile at the physical layer. It might switch from a UWB burst to a Wi-Fi hop, change the entire encryption algorithm, or dynamically vary the data latency based on what it's detecting from the enemy, all without human intervention.
That sounds like an immense computational and security risk, though. If the AI is constantly changing protocols and managing multiple VPNs, what happens if it fails? Or introduces some unrecoverable bug during one of these shifts?
And that is the key implementation challenge that the sources address. And it brings us back to that concept of vetted low-risk software, a concept we'll get into. But fundamentally, the system is designed for failure tolerance. If one segment of that VPN string fails, the AI instantaneously just discards that path and routes the data through the remaining validated segments. The takeaway for the learner here is crucial. In this new spectrum environment, predictability is death.
And dynamic AI-optimized chaos is the ultimate defense.
It is. The AI acts as a ghost in the machine, ensuring the network never ever settles into a recognizable, targetable rhythm.
Which brings us directly to the operational philosophy behind this whole thing, the idea of the living network.
Right, and the core philosophy is laid out so plainly in the documentation. A network that cannot change is a dead network.
And this goes way beyond just tactical adaptation, doesn't it? It's not just about changing how you communicate on the ground.
No, it's about being able to evolve the core software architecture of the system itself in response to new, unseen electronic threats. True survivability, according to these sources, is the ability to update and fundamentally change the system without physically recalling or touching the hardware.
And this capability is enabled through what they call the over-the-air, or OTA, topology shift.
The system must support robust, encrypted OTA firmware updates to fundamentally change its entire structure instantly, enabling it to match a new threat profile detected in the EMS.
Okay, let's walk through what a radical topology shift would actually look like in the field. How does software intelligence defeat a physical kinetic threat?
Okay, so consider this scenario. An adversary starts targeting a classic command structure, a hub-and-spoke arrangement. You've got a central command post as the sole high-value hub, and all the tactical units are the spokes radiating out.
Easy to map.
Very easy. The moment the adversary identifies and targets that center point, which is easy because it has the largest signature, the network can receive a small, rapid OTA update.
And well, what's the consequence of that update? What does it do?
The update instantly reconfigures all the nodes, the radios, the sensors, the UAVs into a distributed peer-to-peer mesh network.
The hub just vanishes.
The hub disappears as a central target, and the network disperses its vulnerability across hundreds of nodes. The command post might still be targeted kinetically, but the network itself survives because the routing intelligence has instantly shifted to a decentralized model.
That's software outpacing kinetic action. A missile is in the air, and before it hits, the target has architecturally ceased to exist.
That's the goal. But that instantaneous shift requires immense and smart processing power, and that brings us to the concept of elastic compute.
Right. Since the nodes are dispersed and often relying on battery power, where should the heavy processing lifting happen? At the edge, on the device, or far away in the cloud?
The beauty of elastic compute is that the network dynamically balances that processing based entirely on the strategic environment. They define two distinct states, push to cloud and pull to edge.
So if the environment is permissive, low jamming, low risk, high bandwidth available, the system should push to cloud.
Correct. Heavy processing tasks, like deep predictive analytics, large-scale intel fusion, detailed digital mapping, all that gets offloaded to robust, secured cloud servers far away from the front lines.
Which makes sense. It conserves precious battery power and processing cycles at the tactical edge.
And lets those frontline units focus purely on their mission.
But the critical survival mode is activated the moment that link becomes contested. That's when the system has to pull to edge.
This is the moment of crisis, When the link is degraded or jammed, the compute tasks are pulled back to the immediate device or unit. And crucially, they stop trying to stream raw, high-bandwidth data, which is difficult to transmit across a contested link.
Instead, they prioritize process metadata.
Exactly. The sensor or radio on the ground does the heavy lifting, processes the complex signal into a small, actionable intelligence packet, a tiny piece of data, and then sends that minimum viable information via a low-signature burst.
So if the enemy jams the bandwidth, the network simply reduces its demand on that bandwidth. It prioritizes the message over the medium's quality.
And through all this complexity, the commander should never have to care. The system has to grow in breadth and adapt entirely in the background.
This ability to grow and adapt so rapidly, it requires a revolutionary development model. It challenges the entire traditional defense acquisition process.
It does. This is where the strategy shifts from a military discussion to a discussion of global innovation. We have to recognize that the best ideas, the most agile patches, the most resilient routing algorithms, they may not come from the few large entrenched defense contractors that typically build these proprietary systems.
So the architecture has to be fundamentally open to global collaboration.
It's all about harnessing capacity, connecting the tactical edge back to the global industrial and academic base via high-speed, secure links. The sources acknowledge that innovation just moves too fast for any single centralized government lab to keep up.
This means activating the full intellectual weight of the entire alliance, maybe even the open source community itself.
Absolutely. The sources cite an extraordinary potential benefit. Imagine a PhD student in a university lab develops a cutting-edge signal processing patch, a new way to clean up noise or use a new frequency band.
Right.
If that patch is vetted, and again, the vetting is the critical guardrail, it can be deployed to a unit in contact within hours.
Within hours, not months or years.
Hours. That speed of iterative innovation is what creates what the source accurately calls the impossible dilemma for the adversary.
The impossible dilemma.
Yes. The sheer diversity and speed of deploying these novel techniques creates a constantly shifting, chaotic target that defies traditional analysis. An adversary can't develop a single effective countermeasure because the lock is changing every single day.
And that lock is being sourced from 1,000 different keys developed globally.
They're forced to fight an entire ecosystem, a decentralized, diverse, peer-driven collective, not just one single military unit or one proprietary system.
This sounds like a genuine philosophical earthquake in how defense systems are built. And the sources highlight this perfectly using the foundational metaphor of the cathedral versus the bazaar.
It's the ultimate contrast in development philosophy borrowed from the software world. The cathedral represents the old proprietary model. Slow, monolithic, centralized, opaque, and managed by a centralized bureaucracy.
And historically, this is the model that has led to massive cost overruns, proprietary lock-in.
And an inability to respond quickly to new threats because the whole process takes a decade.
And the bazaar is the new mandate.
The Bazaar is rapid, diverse, peer-driven, embracing the open source model of development. It recognizes that many eyes on the code find bugs faster, and many contributors generate solutions faster.
And that diversity creates an immediate strategic advantage.
It does, because a diverse code base sourced from numerous contributors is inherently harder to decapitate or defeat with a single zero-day vulnerability. The enemy can't hack the system if they can't even anticipate which of the thousands of versions they're facing today.
But with that kind of global, rapid, open source innovation, the immediate question is, how do you prevent catastrophic chaos? If 1,000 people are contributing code, how do you make sure a brilliant, rapidly deployed patch doesn't accidentally introduce a massive, unseen vulnerability that collapses the whole network?
And the sources address this. The necessity of managing this innovation surge is handled with stringent guardrails. They embrace the Bazaar model, but all novel techniques and software upgrades must pass through a rigorous, automated vetting process before they are cleared for deployment.
And this isn't just about functional testing.
No, it's comprehensive security auditing and risk management. They apply a concept called actuarial risk management to every potential update.
That sounds like something an insurance company would use.
That's exactly the framework. Actuarial risk in this context means calculating the probability and the severity of a catastrophic event. Here, they're calculating the probability of a patch introducing a critical security vulnerability
Against the operational necessity of the capability that patch provides.
Exactly. If a unit is under heavy electronic attack and a new patch promises a 50% improvement in signature reduction, but it introduces a 5% chance of network instability, that calculation is made instantaneously by the system.
So it's a rigorous automated calculation that prevents, human desperation or subjective judgment from introducing dangerous flaws.
Precisely. If the risk calculation is too high, the patch is blocked. The sources make the rule absolute. Code that has not been vetted does not fly. This sophisticated balance ensures that the solution to a tactical problem doesn't accidentally become a strategic vulnerability.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What is this entire architectural low signature, adaptive, decentralized, open source? What does it ultimately do to the adversary's strategic planning?
It creates a massive asymmetric strategic advantage for the defender. It's all about asymmetric cost imposition.
Imposing cost.
That's the ultimate strategic goal. The focus is no longer just on winning the local tactical fight, but on imposing unsustainable financial and opportunity costs on the enemy. We're forcing the adversary to spend vast, disproportionate resources trying to solve problems that were cheap and easy for us to create.
And this comes down to the target dilemma. When the network is composed of thousands of low-power, inexpensive transmitters acting as relays, like those smart minefields, or repurposed commercial routers, kinetic destruction becomes economically irrational.
Think about the dollar cost. If the adversary has to use a multi-million-dollar precision-guided missile or a highly complex, high-powered jamming system to destroy a $500 UWB relay.
They're losing the economic war of attrition every single time.
Every time. By saturating the environment with thousands of potential routers, you make the network unkillable through conventional kinetic strikes. If a missile costs $2 million, you have to destroy 4,000 of those relays just to break even on the expense. And by then, the network is already routed around the losses.
You've weaponized complexity, cheap distributed technology, and the sheer intellectual capacity of a global network.
It creates resilience through overwhelming breadth. If 10 nodes go down, the network still functions seamlessly because the other 90,000 take over the routing automatically. And beyond that, the chaotic nature of the AI-driven system forces the adversary's signals intelligence analysts to spend huge amounts of time and compute power just trying to identify a pattern that's designed to disappear the moment it's found.
And that's an opportunity cost.
A huge one. It forces them to neglect other, more profitable targets.
So what's the final summary of this massive strategic transition? What are we looking at?
We've fundamentally moved away from fighting large-scale combat operations with the static, proprietary, high-signature architectures of the past. The new network is, first, agnostic. It doesn't care about the transport medium.
Second, it's low signature.
Prioritizing invisibility over power. Third, it's evolutionary, meaning it can change its entire topology instantly to match a threat. And maybe most critically, it's globally integrated. It harnesses the full academic and industrial brainpower of the world via that Bazaar model.
The ultimate synthesized goal.
To create a living web that adapts faster than the adversary can target it. It's a system that's designed to be uncatchable.
That was a tremendous deep dive into the blueprint for spectrum-enabled warfare. Let's quickly synthesize the most essential takeaways for you, the learner.
Go for it.
The entire strategic focus has shifted from maximizing signal power to maximizing survivability through signature reduction. And that move is enforced by these really stark tactical imperatives like the rule of 10.
And this survivability relies on some truly surprising technical details. We saw the operational advantage of embracing variable, slow data tiers, deliberately accepting minutes of latency for low-priority traffic just to minimize broadcast time.
Right. And we examine the integration of commercial low-power protocols like UWB, which enables things like, I'm still getting my head around this, smart minefields acting as invisible temporary relays.
And finally, the existential necessity of that AI-driven VPN string. The need to create calculated dynamic chaos to defeat long-term pattern-of-life analysis.
What remains most fascinating to me is the strategic embrace of the open source model, Bazaar, in a field that's been so typically dominated by slow, monolithic, proprietary systems.
And that leads us directly to our final provocative thought for you to consider, to mull over. This entire strategy hinges on the military realizing that speed, diversity, and rapid iteration are the best defenses against a peer adversary. So if global, open source driven, and rigorously automatically vetted software development, that Bazaar model, is the key to military survivability in the contested spectrum, what other critical national infrastructure systems, whether in energy, finance, or essential communication networks, what other systems that currently rely on the monolithic cathedral model are inherently fragile?
How much strategic risk are we all accepting by relying on these slow, proprietary development models?
When we should be fighting a problem with an entire fast-moving ecosystem.
Something to ponder as you look at the digital infrastructure all around you. Thank you for sharing your sources and for joining us for this essential conversation.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.